One of our strongest analysts and just an all-around fun guy. So we'll try not to root too hard for him, but I can't wait to see another exciting match.
Players decide to know people will root for the Iron Jugulus. That's going to be hitting the field. Friedle going to be partnered up next to it. That'll be the booster energy for the Quark Drive. For this one, the speed will be heightened. And looking up against the Ogerpon and Urshifu on the other end, both trainers definitely have a way to be pressuring in to start things out.
Yeah, both sets kind of largely are Trick Room heavy teams, but both of them opting for their fast modes instead. No time for Trick Room. We gotta go fast.
Hey, you want to make sure, too, that you have both of these options kind of available, right? Because you have one team that can be outspeeding, and all of a sudden, because these are speedy options that can be pressuring a lot of damage and maybe trying to take out a Trick Room setter or one of those powerful Pokemon that you want to be using in that Trick Room setting. So being able to have that little bit of respect here going on forward, but I don't know, the Iron Jugulus on the other end, it's one of those Pokemon that can definitely, hold its own, and having access to the Tailwind, you could really just make sure you win the Speed Roar outright.
Sort of an awkward spot where Aaron would also need to terrestrialize that Friedle if he wants it to survive the turn, most likely. First, we'll see a terrestrialization on the other side of the field as Ogerpon hoping to either pump out a little bit more damage or maybe just remove its weakness to those flying type attacks like Air Slash from this Iron Jugulus.
Yeah, you definitely want to make sure that you're not being taken that super critical hit. That's going to be a critical hit coming out from it, but not being super effective will take that a lot better, especially with that special defense boost. Ivy Cudgel now, that is going to be a lot of damage, but no critical hit. It will be surviving through that turn. Friedle not going to be as fortunate as the Wicked Blow from that Urshifu will be a clean one-hit KO.
Oh, that's a really rough first turn for Aaron there. Doesn't get the speed control up. We've seen a few games like this, right? I think that the last time I was up here, I feel like the first game of that set was very similar, where the Tailwind option didn't go for it, traded some damage, and we'll have to see how this goes. So things to keep in mind here, I guess. The terrestrialization was committed on Jimmy's side. We see this Ursaluna now, and we know that the Iron Jugulus could go for a Tailwind to try and help out. However, the problem with that general approach is that the Urshifu, it's a little bit different than what we normally see, right? And not the focus that we've seen. Instead, it is the Assault Vest. So, how well do you know your damage calcs into an Assault Vest Urshifu rather than the Focus Sash version we normally see? And then, I can assume that a Hyper Voice isn't going to pick up a one-hit knockout here. So with the Follow Me Ogerpon right next to it, sort of a tricky spot for Aaron.
Yeah, you have to then be picking on what you're trying to value here, and knowing that there is the potential for that Urshifu to be swapping out into a move that can be doing a super effective hit into this Ursaluna. It is still tricky, even if you terrestrialize. Of course, the terrestrialization into the normal type coming out here, this is going to be for that damage, making sure it is boosted as much as possible. Tailwind coming out, no Follow Me from Jimmy's end. We'll have to see if it's the spread attack. It is Hyper Voice going off into these Pokemon. One holding the Assault Vest, the other with that special defense boost, and neither of them is going to be taken down. Now we get to see that Ivy Cudgel fired off in response, and it looks like it could just be a double up into this Ursaluna. First attack is not going to be enough to get there, but the close combat follow-up will.
Oh, that's a lot of damage. A second quick knockout for Jimmy there. And Aaron's quickly down to 2 Pokemon. He does have that Tailwind advantage, but there's an awful lot of Pokemon to go through on Jimmy's side of the field, especially now that Aaron's going to have to plan out his endgame without knowing the 2 unrevealed Pokemon.
Because one of the issues with the Iron Jugulus is you can get your Tailwind, and at this point the Iron Jugulus has been kind of sitting there, but we got to see how little that Air Slash did with the boost coming out with the Assault Vest on the other end. You could go for a spread damage Snarl, but at that point you're hitting into 2 Pokemon that are just completely fine taking those special attacks. So it kind of feels like when you have so many Pokemon to be getting through at this point, that it's a little bit of a tough position. It will be interesting to see what the 4th and final Pokemon is here, though.
Yeah, I can't imagine what Aaron has that could realistically close this one out. I think he's probably taking some time here. I mean, obviously, there's no decision to make. There's only one Pokemon in the back. But I would guess he's probably more thinking about next game rather than this one because, yeah, I mean, the combination of Amoonguss and Iron Jugulus, there's just not a whole lot of offense there.
No, it's the same issue we got to see earlier with some matches, more of a supportive Pokemon in the back that you can't really do too much with. So what is interesting is this Amoonguss is packing 2 attacking moves, emphasis, quotations around attacking with the Pollen buff, but we do get to see the Sludge Bomb, so no Protect. It does have a little bit more attacking options, which I think is interesting. I don't think in this match it's going to be anything that is necessarily too pivotal. But hey, there is that option here. Maybe this is the speediest, strongest Amoonguss that we've ever seen before.
Yeah, I mean, the Amoonguss we saw earlier when Aaron Trailer was using his version of this team was putting a surprising bit of damage, but, solo Amoonguss taking on the 1v4 Dream seems a little optimistic here. I think likely both players are thinking ahead, but for now, Ogrepon using the Follow Me to try to keep this Urshifu safe for one more big Wicked blow.
And Rage Powder going to be trying to keep the Iron Jugulus safe here from the Pokemon over on the opposing end. Air Slash, it will be more than handily enough to be taking care of the Ogrepon down at this point. What's interesting over about this Amoonguss too is it can take a couple of hits here. It does have the Citrus Berry as well to be getting some of that health back. So brought just down below half here, will be able to regain that up.
Yeah, so not totally over there. Nice turn for Aaron to kind of at least try and move back into this game a little bit. But Fluttermane going to come out now, and even with the Tailwind active on Aaron's side of the field, that Fluttermane easily going to outrun Amoonguss at least. So unless Iron Jugulus could somehow get a one-hit KO in this Fluttermane, which seems pretty unlikely, a Dazzling Gleam and a Wicked Blow combination perhaps could be pretty devastating here. Maybe Iron Jugulus capable of knocking out the Urshifu before it can attack, but there's still an extra Pokemon in the back, and somehow this Iron Jugulus is going to try to find a way to survive this turn.
Into that Farigiraf being that final Pokemon in the back. It's definitely a Pokemon that can be dealing some damage. Air Slash, no attempt into the Fluttermane, instead taking the Urshifu down once and for all. And now the Fluttermane, that is going to be the spread damage. Dazzling Gleam, that will be enough to take care of the Iron Jugulus. Amoonguss is just slowly but surely being chipped. I mean, if you just go for the craziest spores and the craziest sleep turns, hey, you do hit super effective into the last two remaining Pokemon.
Yeah, I mean, got to do everything you can, right? But, this Farigiraf coming in here is not ideal for Aaron.
No.
The Psychic type attack's going to be very powerful against this Amoonguss. And while Amoonguss can heal its partners on, most players' version of this Pokemon using Pollen Puff, it can't heal itself when there's no Pokemon to switch out with. And that is not a lot of health left to work with for Aaron's Amoonguss.
Absolutely not. And that'll be the first turn of Mandatory Sleep here coming out from the Fluttermane. Now, actually, with the Tailwind, the Amoonguss will be the fastest thing. So, hey, we got to see some crazy things on stream. I don't know, maybe this Amoonguss is the craziest thing ever, but it does just look like as soon as one of these Pokemon wakes up, it's going to be done, especially with the Tailwind expiring that turn.
Yeah, at least some interesting information for both players now, understanding a little bit more about Amoonguss and Farigiraf's relative speeds, but it's hard to imagine Aaron getting too much out of it, other than information out of this, especially because Farigiraf is going to wake up right away.
Yeah, it does not want to deal with this whatsoever. Expanding Force, super effective. That's going to be taking the Amoonguss down. But Aaron does have a chance to think about how he's going to adjust in Game 2 in light of the really clean Game 1 that Jimmy was able to offer.
Yeah, excellent game from our hometown hero here. Jimmy kind of just dominated that one, right? And Aaron's going to have to play the beginning of this game better if he wants to play himself into this set. You just can't trade like that in the first turn. I think Jimmy beat him really hard on turn 0, where it seemed like Aaron was probably expecting Jimmy to go with a very different strategy with his lead Pokemon. And Jimmy's immediate aggression kind of just tore through Aaron's team. Lost Farigiraf for nothing, took a ton of damage in return, and then ultimately didn't have the ability to really take advantage of his own Tailwind enough with two very specially defensive Pokemon out, with the Assault Vest on one and the Terrestrialization on the Ogrepon, which increased its special defense.
Yeah, it was definitely just a team that was just not set up very well in light of what Jimmy was able to bring. Because in Ursaluna, especially one that is trained to a point where it can be acting first in these Tailwind situations, is so terrifying. But it just was not in the spot where it was able to really hit that damage that you would need coming out from it, considering how Jimmy has built his team with a lot of respect to these special attacking Pokemon, which just makes it to be a really, really tough situation. And there's a lot of supportive things over on Aaron's end, but only a couple Pokemon that are really meant and built for this damage. If you want to count 2.5 because of the Farigiraf with the throat spray to be able to get a Power 5 for voice, you could do that too, but it's really just the Ogrepon and the Ursaluna for really just powerful attacks.
Yeah, I really liked what Jimmy did. I really like everything that Jimmy did in that game. But one of the things I really liked that Jimmy did in that game was kind of just leaving the Iron Jugulus alone, too, where it could have been problematic if it had hit a few air/flinches, perhaps. But otherwise, it wasn't really threatening much damage. Snarl didn't matter at all with the Pokemon that were out in the field. And, I think that's one of the weaknesses of almost every Tailwind Pokemon in this format, actually, is they kind of just hang out after they use Tailwind.
Yeah.
Often to the disadvantage of their trainer, where them getting knocked out so you get the free switch would be better. Jimmy kind of just focusing down the other slot over and over was a really smart way to approach that first game.
Yeah, at least when you see something like the Tornadus, then you have the potential for the Bleak Winds. However, if you feel about that move, it is something that could definitely be doing some damage. And Snarl can be so detrimental to a team, but not with what Jimmy brought to be leading things out here. So that's where you really have to be kind of looking at this next game into what you want to be doing to try and eliminate it. Going into our game two, definitely a lot of a different lead here coming out from both players, actually. Both bringing the Wellspring Ogerpon. Aaron is going to have the Amoonguss to start with Ferograph for Jimmy on the opposing end.
Yeah, I think this could be a great turn one for Jimmy once again, where I think he kind of brought this time what Aaron was probably expecting in game one, where Jimmy could safely get Trick Room up if he wants to, and then kind of adjust from there. Aaron's a little more neutral, right, where I think in or out of Trick Room, this duo can handle a lot of things, but we saw how much damage that Expanding Force to do Amoonguss last game, so still slightly a tricky position for Aaron here.
100%. And looking at even the Pokemon that Jimmy had at the back too, we got to see that he went for a very different game mode this time around. So whether Aaron's expecting that fully or how he's prepped his 4 Pokemon, I think it's going to be huge. Well, I'm going to have an opportunity to catch one of those third ones as Amoonguss swapping out. That will be the Iron Jugulis still brought out to play and hitting the field here in our game 2.
Nice little switch there from Aaron. Avoids any potential super effective psychic type attacks and gets the Swords Dance off. I assume this is going to be mostly uncontested, so Aaron could be well on his way to turning this one around.
Hornleech from the opposing end. That's going to be a good chunk of damage coming out here, but the Expanding Force is going to be none, of course, immune hitting into that Dark-type Pokemon. So now you have to look at the fact that there is this +2 Ogerpon over on Aaron's end of the field, because you want to make sure that it's not running through your own team. Yes, it took a lot of damage, but it can threaten that right back with its own Hornleech. That would be doing significantly more and assumingly picking up a one-hit KO.
Yeah, this is a really tense turn, right, where I think whatever Aaron chooses to target with this Ogerpon is really important. He's got to get a knockout, I feel like, with this. You're missing into the opposing Ogerpon's Protect, for instance, and giving up a free Trick Room probably just loses him the game right here. Very important target. If he can pick up a knockout, if he can start getting Tailwind up again, probably there's a path for Aaron here, but critical turn, and the opposing Ogerpon using Follow Me is going to ensure that if Jimmy wants that Trick Room, he's probably going to get it.
A Snarl at least will just deal a little bit of spread attack, but notably dropping the special attack of the Ferograph. It definitely has the potential to deal a little bit of its own damage to Trick Room once given. Hornleech, though, even at that +2, and with that little bit of Snarl chip, not going to be enough to be picking up that KO, but it will be filling up the hole. And honestly, at this point, too, you're making sure that Torkoal that Jimmy has in the back doesn't come in for free, so I don't necessarily hate not getting that hit.
Yeah, I think it might actually be better. I mean, it's going to cause Aaron to probably lose a little bit more HP with these Pokemon, but yeah, I mean, you have a Snarled Ferograph, so it's at least a little bit slowed down here. You're in a situation where it's much less free to switch in the game. I think Aaron's going to be very careful about how he picks up knockouts now, where the more you can draw out this Trick Room, make things more challenging for that Torkoal, the better. And Aaron doesn't know what's in the back, right? There's actually nearly every Pokemon, I think, is still like a pretty reasonable thing that could be in the back, other than maybe Fluttermane. So how Aaron plays this really, you got to be careful, right? Where I think that with what we're looking at, I think he's got to preserve Ogerpon, right? Its HP is going to matter a lot, but Aaron might be expecting something different. So it's going to be a really tricky turn for both trainers.
Yeah, and at this point, too, not even waiting for something to go down, but instead manually swapping this Torkoal in. Of course, the drought was at the sun, but Torkoal coming in, you want to make sure this is a safe swap, and it's not going to be taken down. Spiky Shield on the other end, though, from Aaron, so that's going to be one Pokemon that's not doing any damage whatsoever, and the double protect. This swap for absolute free.
Yeah, I think that was a really good swap. I mean, I guess it would have been somewhat free no matter what. A Snarl there perhaps could have made a pretty big difference, but really well played turn by Jimmy there. Gets the absolutely free switch in. Still going to have this Follow Me available, so Ogerpon can take something away from this Torkoal. And Aaron's in a really tough spot here where you can't swing at this Torkoal immediately, going to have to knock out Ogerpon first. And 2 very powerful eruptions could be all it takes for Jimmy to move on to day 2.
Yeah, this Torkoal with the Charcoal, with the Sun, and not having taken any damage on the swap in. And a Snarl last turn could have been absolutely huge. It would have disrupted the amount of damage the Eruption was doing. It would have gotten a special attack drop, and you could have had maybe a little bit more survivability in these terms. But the fact that the Torkoal now can just go for that Terra Fire and just go for super powerful Eruptions, that's one of those things that's really tough. You already did your Protects last turn, and here with the Terrestrialization, I mean, this Turtle's going on the offense.
Yeah, I mean, nothing else to do, right? He got in the perfect setup. I really like how aggressively he's played this. We've kind of seen some Trick Room players slow play their Trick Rooms a little bit. He went all the way their way, quickly as he could. Aaron just trying to get a little lucky maybe to get out of this, but the Eruption going to hit both these Pokemon. It's going to be a lot of damage for free.
For sure. That is going to be 2 KOs on Torkoal's tally, actually, as the first Eruption is going to be enough to more than get the job done, and that's going to bring Aaron down to his final 2 Pokemon, one of them being the Amoonguss. We'll have the opportunity to see the final one in this match, but switching up that game mode, being able to get this Trick Room and the Torkoal in the perfect spot. Jimmy's in such a commanding position.
Yeah, just a wonderful set by him so far. I think leading really well in both games and then playing very well from the advantages he got in Team Preview. This is still a tough spot for Aaron. He does have a great duo for Trick Room, right? It's not quite over yet, but it's still, Amoonguss facing no Torkoal, it's not a very advantageous situation. And because of the redirection potential of this Ogre Pond, it's not so simple. Like, even if you terrestrialize Amoonguss and try to get a Spore off, you're not necessarily going to be able to get it. And Jimmy's going to build up a huge lead here the way, right? A bunch of damage will come onto the other side.
That's one of the things about the Ogre Pond that makes it so difficult to go up against, especially as an Amoonguss, because even if you try to fire off a Spore, you can get redirected because it's not a Powder Move on the other end, even if the Ogre Pond is a Grass-type Pokemon, and the Spore is just going to be completely negated. So it's definitely a really, really tough position, and the Eruptions here, it just feels like it can go completely full rain, and it's, I don't know, that's a tough.
Yeah, I feel like you have to protect the Amoonguss and just see what you can get done with Ursaluna. Just hope that somehow you get in a situation where, you've done enough damage to Torkoal that Amoonguss can survive and Pollen Puff, but that's just asking for so much.
Amoonguss on this turn, that's going to be the Terra Fairy, as Ursaluna is going to be the one protecting this time around. See what this poor little mushroom can do. Follow me over onto the opposing end here. And that now is Eruption. We'll have to see how much this is going to do to the Amoonguss, if it even has the chance. This is not going to be a super effective hit anymore, but this is still a dangerous situation. The Amoonguss, still no chance.
I guess it just doesn't matter, right? And certainly if Amoonguss was knocked out one hit, I don't think Ursaluna would have fared any better. It's not much you can do, I guess, where Aaron's solution to this situation was not to get into this situation. And wow, what a set Jimmy has played here against one of the toughest trainers around, and he makes it look easy, going to very cleanly find his way into the day 2. What a performance.
The hometown hero makes it to day 2. Another chance, is opportunity to try and push through the